Hello and welcome to In Conversation, a dublab podcast where each week we will bring you interviews from the dublab radio archives.
Good morning.
Good morning to you too.
Welcome to Dublab.
This is wonderful.
Yeah, it's an internet radio station and production collective based here above the Virgil, which at one point was called Little Temple, and you've had a couple of concerts here, actually, that were put together by Kifis, Chiancia, and the Rotary Room.
That was a wonderful evening.
It was.
We had.
Yeah, you were accompanied by our friend Gabe Noel, a.k.a. Janitor.
Excellent. Excellent.
Very cool. And David Pilch was one of the music directors of that series, and he's a close collaborator of yours as well.
Well, I both of those people, I admire them because they're fretless. Their instruments are fretless, and I always like people who do not fret. Mm-hmm. And David Pilch is great at it, and so is Gabe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're going to start with a few things just to kind of break the ice and get us in, but they're kind of grander concepts. On your website, bananastan.com, which is actually a really wonderful website. It's well designed. It's easy to navigate. But you write some incredible notes about yourself and about your life, and you largely focus on parts of your life that people don't know about, not the ones that are most commonly publicized, like, for instance, your work on Smile, primarily. But at the end of this piece that you wrote, this essay, you say, "My best work is ahead of me." And so that's leading me into the idea of, what are you working on? What are you envisioning? What are you feeling most drawn to produce at this time in your life?
Oh, well, that's it's hard to say, even in the present tense. I've been, for example, for the last couple of days, 2 weeks ago, I was in the studio with Kimbra, who got, I think last year they said she got the Grammy, if you believe in trophies, which I'm skeptical about. She got the best single of the year. Mm-hmm. She's 23, very disciplined. I did a string section for her, septet. That's my irreducible minimum. And amazing. Like, the violist in the string septet was... first violist was Maria Newman. Her father wrote the 20th century Fox theme that we're all so familiar with. Randy's uncle, Alfred Newman, whom I met when I was producing Randy's first record. So, yeah, I was doing that. Next week up comes a full-blown orchestration for Efterklang, a group that can't be pronounced here, apparently, but they're excellent, and I guess you'd call them technopop. Then I'm doing about 30 minutes of music for the, starting in March. Due in March is 30 minutes and change for the Shanghai Philharmonic. So I'll get my first bank wire transfer from China. How about that?
Oh, that's wonderful.
At the age of 71, I feel amazed by that, actually. And let's see, I'm talking about doing some tunes, maybe 5 tunes for an album by Cassandra Wilson, a jazz singer. That is also supposed to start in March, but won't be due till May. So as an arranger, I have a lot to do.
Yep.
But there are other things that are very close to my vest and stuff that I love to do. And that is, I have now a priority to finish what I started. Mm-hmm. And I started a theatrical musical in my mind, that it was my opinion, nobody else's really, to do a theater piece based on the tales of Brer Rabbit. They're morality tales. They're what Mark Twain called our most precious piece of stolen goods. He was thinking of American folklore, of course. So I'm doing that, and I'm scouring my computer to find a whole bunch of music that I have almost finished for the last, say, 20 years.
Yeah.
So I have a lot on my plate right now, and it's all just wonderful. I mean, it's a life in music. Of course, it's also a life in music that is dominated by things like Spotify, which, by the way, my entire catalog is on Spotify. But I must tell you, I'm working harder and harder for less and less in terms of making a dent in the rent. This appalls me and saddens me so much that people seem to forget that, and to me it's an ethical issue, that we must support our artists, the people who try to make life better. And the way to do that for musicians is by buying physical album copies. And that's how musicians can eat. Mm-hmm. And so...
Well, in my hands, I'm holding the most recent release in your catalog, something you said you were working on for about 3 years. It's called Super Chief, and I'm holding a beautiful vinyl copy that will be available internationally in the next couple of months, but it is currently available in Japan. It says Music for the Silver Screen, composed by Dyke Parks. Tell us a little bit about Super Chief, and we'll get people excited about getting ready to buy a physical copy.
Oh, that's very nice. It'll be out in the United States on a label called Yep Rock, and it both in vinyl and in CD. And in the vinyl, there's an embedded CD. This is music that is all instrumental, all orchestral, and it is to illustrate the trip I took first in 1955 to come to California from Princeton, New Jersey, and it took 3 days, and I wanted to give an impression to those who didn't live in that golden age of transcontinental railroad travel, what it was like on this beautiful luxury liner. And it was really an eye-opener for me.
You're an incredibly prolific artist, and you tend to really gravitate towards storytelling in your lyrics and in your conceptual albums. I feel like a lot of the albums that you've made are like Super Chief, in that you are giving them a progression. You're giving them a cinematic representation all in the music, and it's a really wonderful thing that you've been able to do, I feel like, from the earliest parts of your career.
Well, you know, I really think that an album, I come from an age, now we remember I'm old and in the way. I'm 71 years old. But when I came into this racket, records were the physical reality of a recording suggested in an album that a person might sit down and put on a record and spend, a half an hour or so escaping or not escaping, depending on the contents of the record. But so I got the the idea that my recordings would be somehow coherent, have a through line, start at A and end up at Z. But that is not always a conscious affair. That my first album was called Song Cycle, and on Warner Brothers, and it was branded as a maverick, to use an oxymoron there, because of course mavericks aren't branded; they're without a brand. Mm-hmm. And but inadvertently, it ended up being called a concept record, and nobody'd used that word before. Song Cycle, they called it a concept record. I guess that was to try to give it some stature that it didn't really have, because I've maintained since then I made every mistake that could be made in doing an album. I didn't realize I'd have an audience. That was something beyond my comprehension. I didn't think anybody would listen to it. I didn't even consider the importance of trying to be clear and project. Instead, I investigated myself, my own dilemmas, and tried to somehow molt from my psychological. So I did that in public as artists do with albums, but yet from that album I learned something that stuck with me throughout my generally stingy career in making albums. I don't have too many out there. I don't forget how many.
You've made so many, though, with other people as well. I mean, you're an incredibly prolific artist. And I mean, you say 71 is old and in the way, but for us, like, I mean, you're as youthful and energetic as can be. And you have so many projects still in the works. And your discography, though I don't think it's really represented on your website or on Discogs or Wikipedia in full, is huge.
Well, it's amazing.
And your filmography as well. And you're a filmmaker, and you're an actor, and you know, and I'm wondering if you have books of poetry and or lyrics in the works, or if you're going to be working on publications of your sheet music, or various other things. I mean, you're telling me you have a musical theater project that you're gonna realize on Brer Rabbit. I mean, this is amazing, Van Dyke. This is incredible.
There's a lot of ruckus between the page and the stage. It's not, and I'm not counting any chickens before they hatch. I mean, it's not a slam dunk. Theater is the hardest ball game in music, and yet it's something that I haven't done. I mean, really done. I've been a tune doctor on Broadway. I've written music for the Boston Shakespeare Theater. I've done Shakespeare at Kennedy Center for Henry IV Part 2. I did that. But in terms of a musical, I haven't really had the opportunity, and just simply because there's I've had 3 offspring to put through school and so forth. I've had responsibilities, so I've stayed in LA to be an arranger, orchestrator, sometimes a composer of television shows or movies, best forgotten. But in fact,
you're so humble. I mean, really, because I mean, we're here as fans. We're so excited to have you here in our studio. And I mean, you've produced like major works over the years. I mean, you were involved in so many great things. I know it's maybe embarrassing or difficult for you to accept that and deal with that, and you kind of brush it off because you need to just keep moving. But I mean, this is awesome, Van Dyke. This work we're all celebrating around the world. I mean, it's incredible. Songs Cycled, which is in front of me, one of your latest records, actually the last release before Super Chief. We were just talking about the cover, but I mean, it's genius how you reinterpreted some of these pieces of yours. I mean, maybe one of your missions is to actually be an advocate and an activist for the environment and for the ocean.
Well, we all need to be. I carry in my iPhone a letter I wrote to Frank Sinatra asking him to get a friend of mine to head the Coastal Zoning Commission, and she got the job, as a matter of fact.
Oh, good.
But so this has always been the respect for nature, for creation as we found it. You see, I really believe we don't own this place. It's not like we received this place, this earth, from our ancestors. We owe it to our children. It belongs to our successors. So we must protect it. And this, I try to put this issue in my work.
You do.
But without scolding.
Yeah.
I don't want to scold. I'm not a scold. I mean, really, quite frankly.
Well, you're a wit. You have an incredible way of telling a story and communicating. And every time I listen to your music, I feel like you're dancing and you're also teaching. And there's something really incredible about that,
Well, I try to be true to myself ultimately, and that's all that I can do. I wish I could. I wish I were a crowd pleaser. I wish I were easily branded. I wish I weren't genre hopping, and I wish I didn't write what I know. I would like to lie my way through to a hit song. But in fact, that's not in the cards for me. It hasn't been really. And so, what can I say? I go a lot of places.
Yeah,
in songs cycled, for example, I go a lot of places. I mention in The Parting Hand, I talk about contemplation of mortality. That's an issue. It's on my mind.
You're looking great. You are. And I've heard you play recently, and I know you have a concert pretty soon at McCabe's, and I think you're doing awesome. I just have to say.
Well, that's really nice of you. I'm a shadow of my former self. I know that, but I still think that's true. That my best work is ahead of me, and it must be. I mean, I must believe that, and everybody should, I think, hold to that, to stay more interested than attempt to be interesting. And I think that what defines me is nothing of myself, but what has surrounded me that I want to reveal. So that's the way I feel about the music.
Yeah.
It's almost like I want to lug this stuff, some of this stuff from the past, and I want to take it forward with a sense of, maybe, I hate to say it, but clairvoyance, or at least clarity. And I would say that although I'm looked at as an outsider or sometimes unique or eccentric, that I've been called eccentric, I think that it's really that I am imitative, and that's what I like in my to pursue in my work. I believe, for example, that cliche can be an art form. In truth, if I were charged with the crime of being pop, I must plead guilty, because I come from that world, that explosive world. It was at the death knell of the beat era that I came out to California, and that was 1962. That was a year before The Endless Summer. That was the Beach Boys. That was a year before the Rolling Stones' first record, 12 by 5, Bob Dylan, Freewheelin'. It was the beat era. And in those days, diversity, or what they call eclecticism, was something very welcome, and it was a sign of sanity, of a healthy mind, to fall in love with everything good. That was over 50 years ago, you see, that I came out to California and played in the coffee houses. Recently, I met a fellow by the name of Jack White. And Jack White has a record company. This fella has a record company in Nashville. And he asked me to do a spoken word record. And I was thinking about all the things that I could do, and what I decided I would do was a poem by Lawrence Ferlinghetti. I recommend anybody who would refer to it to check it out. It's called I Am Waiting. Because it challenges the present tense to move forward with a greater resolve. I am waiting for the American eagle to spread its wings and soar and fly right. It's a skeptical approach to what we call Americana. And I am a skeptic as well, in how I view this country. I may have mentioned to you, I think before we started, about the fellow on the street as I came to the studio who had the sign that said, "Ban fracking." My heart leapt with joy to know that somebody was out there, someone who cared about our environment, what we might leave for our children. Right now, this year, I'm planting milkweed in my yard because this year may be the last year of the migration of the monarch butterfly. I've grown up with that butterfly. So, you see, the world is changing rapidly and violently as species are being wiped off the face of the earth. I want, in my work, to see the variety of life and its expressions as diverse and as vigorous as they were when I got here. Mm-hmm. I'm an idealist.
Or even more so, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I know that all sounds highfalutin, but that's really...
Well, not for me, honestly. You're maybe with one of the few people that will interview you or talk with you that thinks along these lines and may even want to kick you in the butt for being too humble, because I feel like you have a great ability with your vocabulary to kind of not be too full of yourself, but in fact you are right on, Van Dyke, and it's really important that more great artists like yourself are willing to say how they feel, to report about not only what's going on in their own lives, but what they see in the world and what they are interested in having the world become. What they envision for the future of the planet, not just hey, this is what happened to me in this relationship, and that's all good and fine too. We learn from that as well, but this is really important stuff, Van Dyke. It's as serious as can be. We have to deal with it.
But we both realize, I think that you get a sense of it, how fortunate I've been. I mean, I've been able. There are a lot of people out there, and this is not a mark of modesty, but just good common sense. There are a lot of people with superior gifts to mine in musical or song crafting terms, or vocal ability, certainly, who never get heard, not one damn note. And I have been lucky to have some of my thoughts recorded and publicly available, although Warner's, of course, has consigned a lot of my work to the dusty vaults, and that's ignominious. That's really something I just don't understand, why they wouldn't let me have all my work and release in my lifetime. The hell with it after I'm gone. It doesn't matter to me, but while I'm here...
Are you talking about albums you made that have not been released?
Well, no, that have been released and fell out of release. That they hold in the vaults, and that bugs me. For example, yesterday was the anniversary of the date that anybody of Japanese ancestry in the United States would be put in prison. They called them
internment camps.
Internment camps,
mm-hmm.
And I wrote a song called Manzanar on my Tokyo Rose album.
Right.
And I think there's probably one of my better songs, and. It's California. It's a huapango. Actually, it's a Mexican rhythm, but it's not available. And it just is amazing to me that could not have been celebrated as a caution to a new generation against racism in any form.
Is there a possibility that those songs can appear on another album similar to Songs Cycled that revisits some of your great works?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't re-record that record.
Okay.
I think that record I was going to say, so a record, listening to a record album at one time, people had that ability, that grace, when you could hear yourself think. There was a time when people would put a record on and have a half an hour to pay attention to something, and what that would do would be would offer a through line, an exposition, something that would start at A and hit every base and end up at Z. It's like a short story.
Yeah.
So Tokyo Rose was a short story. Mm-hmm. Now, that's allowed in literature. Even today, they're called novellas. Kurt Vonnegut put out a book called Hocus Pocus about the same time, probably with the same dismal sales results, because Tokyo Rose, the album I did, sank without a trace. But, you see, I felt a collective responsibility, not guilt really, but perhaps guilt. Or certainly regret that I wasn't there to stop it. Because, of course, I had a Japanese Japanese-American gardener who'd been in the concentration camp, the internment camp, and who probably would have been a doctor had he not been waylaid and incarcerated. So, all of which speaks to the short story. Now, I think we should allow that. Unfortunately, in this day and age, with the shuffle mentality that has been pushed on us by corporatized information, and that's both the record racket and the news racket, and it's true in journalism, they are appealing to the shortest form available, almost anecdote. But
fragments,
just a step away from fracking.
Exactly.
They're fracking information.
They are,
and they, I think, are underestimating the public. And a public, which, by the way, now has been conned into the attention span of a Cocker Spaniel that just doesn't allow for development of thought. And so I'm not condemning anybody. Music can do many things. There's music around me that I don't understand, the music today that I don't understand, but I don't condemn any any musician to me is innocent by nature. Music is an instrument of peace and understanding, essentially.
There aren't that many artists who have broken through in the industry or who have not, that write, play as many instruments as you do, sing. You're a lyricist. You're an actual producer. You're into the whole creation of these albums, and I would like to talk to you about this wonderful image on the cover of Song Cycled, but before we get to that, I'd just like to say that I see you as somebody that is envisioning, whether from beginning to end intentionally, which you said is not always intentional, but you're envisioning ultimately this whole experience, and you are actually very present and involved in that experience for yourself, and then ultimately how you're going to express it and how you're going to communicate it. And that feels to me like filmmaking, that feels to me like opera, that feels to me like something that you have your life in. So you have a life in music, but you have a life in these arts which communicate so many different ideas, and it's really incredible. I'm not here today just to kind of toot your horn, but we are excited to celebrate you here today, Van Dyke, and it's really amazing. I mean, Randy Newman's first record, Ry Cooder's first record. You worked with Tim Buckley, Harry Nilsson, Phil Oakes, so many, the Byrds, so many contemporary artists too. You know, you've worked with artists that we wouldn't think. I know when the Joanna Newsom record that you did the arrangements on came out here at Dublab, it was a big hit, and we were on the forefront of not only celebrating a young artist, but saying like, hey, and Van Dyke Parks is central to its sound, and it's exciting. So I feel like having a 15-year-old son myself who loves record albums and who is an avid reader and an avid writer, it gives me hope and makes me think that the young generations are going to start really tuning into the experience of a record, the like the ability that it has to really communicate a whole idea via a suite of songs. You know, and films have this capacity. Conversation has this capacity. Yeah. You know, so
well, that's true. You know, and so to pursue, for example, in Song Cycled, which this was my last effort. This was in 1913. Pardon me, 20. I just mentioned my mother's birth year.
Oh, good.
Dear heart, she was wonderful. She'd come out of church and she'd say, "Thirst after righteousness." We all knew that meant another rum Coke. But anyway, now 2013, I came out with Songs Cycled last year. It shows my love for arranging, and it is through arranging that I have found a great life force. And this is what has helped me move forward. And I tell you something, this is the truth. It is taking on nurturing the ability to just be nobody to reflect on somebody, to try to abet somebody else's interests. You mentioned Joanna Newsom, for example, or the Randy Newman, or Ry Cooder certainly was my first co-production, it was called. To stay productive, I've had the opportunity of hiding behind the curtain and trying to bring, a framework to someone else. I think arranging, by the way, is really important to music, and it's an area where very few people are interested. That people are interested in being record producers or record artists because, of course, there's money in them are hills. There's no money in arranging, really. But arranging is to me the desirable job. I mentioned, I believe, that I'd worked in coffee houses when I came out here in '62.
Right.
This is when I started getting interested in arranging.
Remember some of your earliest influences as an arranger?
Well, yeah.
Were you listening to popular arrangers? Were you listening to classical composers?
No. There was a lot of music in our house because I was the youngest of four boys. They all played instruments. Cornet.
You started playing at 4, right?
Yeah, I started playing at 4. But then by 7, I was into clarinet. And that was a big deal. I was always first chair, even when my feet could not hit the floor. Mm-hmm. And I thought I wanted to be a clarinetist. I came out here and I found out that there were a lot of people who played as well or better than I did.
But you still played. And you still play, yeah.
Well, I can play out a clarinet these days, but I use the Albert system. That's an old system. That's before Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue. That gliss up. It's like driving an old Buick without power steering. It's a very difficult way to play clarinet with the Albert system. But the early influences were people like Ellington, mm-hmm. Artie Shaw, Fats Waller, George Shearing, the popular artists, okay?
Yep.
Then in 1948, I heard my first Spike Jones, that was Cocktails for Two. I got interested in tuneful percussion. I realized that recorded music was different from acoustic music. Man, I loved everything. All the classical stuff, the Dead White Guys, the European music, medieval music. But I had all the while, I had a particular love for music that included roots sensibility mm-hmm. and had roots reality that were fancified,
which Ellington personifies. Yeah,
absolutely.
It's like folkloric American music, but like with dreams on it or something. It's incredible.
Aaron Copland did the same thing for me, yep. but I thought he was rather a cold fish. I took one.
Fletcher Henderson's one of my favorites.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But all of these arrangers, and then in classical, what they call classical music, I loved Percy Grainger. Percy Grainger wrote this thing called Danny Boy, which was a tune from an old Irish air called Londonderry Air, which doesn't mean a hind end. That means a piece of music is an air. But he made a ton of money when there was money to be made in music. Now, sheet music in those days is this was during World War I, so say 1915. A piece of music sold for 10 cents. Half of that, that's 5 cents, went to the creative force, and half went to the publisher, who paid for the expenses of printing. Compare that with Spotify, a fraction of a cent. See what we have done to our artists. Everyone consider what has happened to television now with its forced jollity and laugh tracks. It ain't the real deal, folks. Mm-hmm. I guarantee you, it ain't the real deal. It ain't the real deal when we see artists getting a fraction of a cent. I read that 100,000 airplays, 100,000 downloads of a Spotify tune just reaped a band $80. That went to the lead singer. Folks, look at this. Those of you who would download music from Spotify or think that you can support artists by going to Amazon or iTunes, check it.
How much do you make when somebody downloads something from Amazon or iTunes? Do you know?
I know it's fractional. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, I mean, because I buy physical releases all the time, and I also buy downloads, and I'm expecting an artist like yourself to get at least a third of the download money. Do you think you are?
All I can tell you is I rent a house.
Because, I mean, I even think the 50-50 you were talking about with the publisher is off base. Because the publisher shouldn't get 50%. They should maybe get like 25%, you know? They didn't have that much to do.
Well, that's changed. But you see, it's just that big pie.
Right.
The pie. Let's call returns. Let's just look at it as a pie. Consider it on a pie chart. The creative portion of that pie, that slice that goes to the creators, has gotten smaller and smaller.
Absolutely.
And that's due completely to executive greed at record companies and the chicanery of the lawyers that are in collusion with them that pretend that they're representing future clients.
And the ignorance of the artists, which is not always their fault. I think people get tricked out of
absolutely.
a lot of their rights to these things.
Absolutely. You know? But you see, there's only one thing that interests me that is a co-determinant in that, and that is that a room full of musicians costs money. Mm-hmm. One time, a producer actually said to me when I was doing a score to a television show, he said, Van Dyke, there is no money in the music budget for musicians. Now, I'm telling you, that's the only downside. The thing is, you see, this is very interesting to me because music has always had patronage. You look at the age of the Esterházys, let's see, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, or the age of monarchy, when people like Mozart or Haydn or people like this, composers got supported by nobility and royalty. There's always been a patron. When I was a brunette, there was a patron. It was called a record company. Mm-hmm. So there's always been patronage. Now, what we're talking about with the age of Bandcamp is no patrons. Now, that has had a significant, and I would say harmful, effect on the kind of music that we hear.
I agree.
So darn it, that's a fact. I weasel my way around things like that to get my pleasure sometimes. Like last month, I was up in, actually Oakland, but in the Bay Area near San Francisco. There was a group called the Awesome Orchestra, AWESO umlaut ME. They're all in their 20s and 30s, and they're all, a full orchestra. Mm-hmm. If you want 96 pieces, that's what comprises a philharmonic. That can be the quietest sound in the world, and the most beautiful, by the way. They all get together for nothing. And so they asked me to come up and do a show with them. And I did it, and it's just incredible. So a night, I still can enjoy a night of a full-blown orchestral performance. I did it last year when went to Australia and worked with, that's where Kimbra and Daniel Johns, who was from Silverchair, a brilliant musician, they humbled themselves, speaking of humility, and they became my background singers for a show there I did there. I go to Europe, anywhere but the United States.
I'm sure that was an honor for them. They had a blast.
We twisted everybody's knickers. We had, that was such that anybody who was sitting there.
What venue was it?
Oh, some Royal Hall down there.
Yeah.
It's the Adelaide Festival.
Right, good.
You see, if I go to a festival, it doesn't matter. I'm anonymous. Nobody knows my name, and that's what I worked very hard to be anonymous. And I finally achieved that goal, and now I'm not known. So, but if I go to a festival, like I was asked to go to Roskilde. There's, the guy hit on me in a Berlin hotel lobby. He said, "Would you play our festival?" I said, "Well, you'd lose your shirt." He said, "No, you don't understand. It's not you that they're coming to see. They come to see who we tell them to listen to." Mm-hmm. So And so there I was. I played in front of 17,500 people, and it was just a remarkable occasion to do that. And so there's still ways around, but for the musician who is just coming into his or her own these days, the new musician, the struggling new musicians of great potential and ability and high hopes, it's a harder situation. The nice thing about what we're doing here today is you're talking to me as a person. You're trying to celebrate my work, and that's just so touching and rare. But the thing is, what's great about this is that I'm not unique. I am not atypical. I am typical. The work you talk about there, that songs cycled, I paid for that with a loyal wife watching me and allowing it to happen. Mm-hmm. I paid for this to happen. I paid these musicians. I am a self-made man. I mean, I couldn't get arrested in a woman's penitentiary with a fistful of pardons. I couldn't, but let alone get laid. The thing is, I had to do it myself. Mm-hmm. I knocked on every door in the United States, every record company, to release this record, and they wouldn't do it. So I was just happened to be in England on another job, and somebody said, why don't we put out a record? And so I found my opportunity finally, and I'm just hoping that story, my own improbability, I hope that story gives someone else some hope.
Yeah.
That it can happen.
Well, one thing I do want to point out, though, to those of you who are listening and hearing Van Dyke, is that you've worked really hard, though. And so I'm not going to say that you have, like you're saying, you're not unique in the sense that you have had to earn it all, but you've also worked really hard, and you've focused yourself on the gifts that you've had, and you've seized the opportunities you've had, and I applaud that. I really do. I feel like a lot of people in this world don't have the opportunities that you or I may have, but at the same time, to make the most of what you have the potential to do, which you have, even though you've struggled through some of it, that's awesome. That's really wonderful. And so I would just say to everybody out there, like, just go for it. Keep writing, keep recording, keep doing any aspect of it that you're involved in. Don't ever give up on that, because this is an example of a man here, very prolific artist, very little fluff. I was listening last night to the Happy End record.
Oh,
it's a great record. Yeah,
that was so great.
Listening to the Mighty Sparrow record, which your label reissued, and that's an interesting story. I'm sure you could tell us about, but yeah, I think I was excited when they called me to come and talk to you today, because I'm like, he does it all. It's very rare. It's just rare.
It was a good point to do this. The Mighty Sparrow record, I must say. That record was done in a day. In
1974, right?
Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. No, actually, it was done we did it in 71.
71, okay.
Yeah, so, they waited, they kept it in the vault so they could write it off.
Aha.
Yeah, very tricky. Anyway, talk about cooking books. Record companies know how to do that.
Yeah, man.
But the guys are in the galley cooking the books. But we did that Sparrow record, the Mighty Sparrow, this great Calypsonian. We did that in a day, in a hurricane. Actually, the eye of the hurricane came right over Miami, and while we were recording, the rain was rushing one way horizontally, and when we opened the door, and then an hour later it was still, and then not much later the rain started flying like crazy in the opposite direction. So we were on our own power at Mac Emmerman's studios called Criterion. That was where a lot of great hits were made. Crosby, Stills and Nash, and a whole bunch of people went down there. also like to take time in the studio, and it shows, that I do spend time trying to present entertainments for the ear.
Mm-hmm. I have a few questions, and I feel like I don't want to.
Yeah.
I may confuse myself even about this, but I'm curious about your point of view about writing for instruments versus lyricism. The idea of the fact that you're communicating via maybe a single instrument when you're playing on one of the many instruments you play, versus writing and imagining for a small ensemble, a chamber group, or an orchestra, and then on the other side of that, writing a lyric, and this whole interview, I'm thinking about the lyrics to Surf's Up, and I'm just like, what were you thinking about coming up with that? Anyway, if there's a way that you could interpret what I'm asking, and kind of give us a sense of how you approach those things, or how you feel, what the differences or similarities may be, the connections.
Well, I would say both in writing lyrics and in arranging. Those are the two fields?
Yeah, okay. More or less, yeah.
Okay. Both of them they present a dilemma, and that is like man in crisis. And I like to think of that as a physical comedy, like a Buster Keaton movie or something. Because it's a series of defensive maneuvers that finally suggest an escape. So the solution, and for example, in lyrics, if you think, they say which comes first, the music or the lyrics. Well, in the case of Surf's Up, the music came first. They say which comes first, the music, the lyrics, and the answer is the phone call. But in the case of Surf's Up, the music came first. Now, what does that mean to a lyricist? It means don't change a note, because you don't want to insult the composer. And also, if you take a note out of a melody, the entire house of cards can fall. So that was rule one. One thing was absolutely essential, and that is not to change one note. So that became a challenge to come up with syllables. And when one day, and for example, in Heroes and Villains, I've been in this town so long that back in the city I've been taken for lost and gone and unknown for a long, long time. That was exactly what those syllables required. So to me, it's very funny. It's just a quantitative challenge. You have to play by the rules. Rule one is don't violate the melody. And I think that often I listen to music that has lyrics, and I couldn't care less what they're saying, because the music explains it for me. So, but that's the truth. So it's also true in arranging. What is arranging? Arranging is basically, do you want it good or do you want it Monday? That's the first question. The second one to me is, how much? How much money do we have, and how much time do we have, which will dictate how many musicians or how few musicians we should have. So these are very ho-hum, dull, almost vulgar subjects. Mm-hmm. None of this is really lofty thought. This is all man in crisis reasoning. First is to reason the way through. How much time, how much money do we have just to get this job done? So how much space is there for these words? So how much is a very, primary consideration to all this? It sounds very plebeian and vulgar, but that's my confession.
What about when that's out of the way? What about when all of those more very, very crucial and important but mundane things are out of the way? You're still channeling content for that precise melody for those syllables, for that tone, for something that's been set forth for you in the cases where you're being hired. I mean, I imagine as a lyricist, sometimes you're on your own thinking like, hey, I'm writing this for me. Who knows where it's going to go, right? So there are different scenarios, right?
Yeah, but both of these things that you're talking about, arranging and writing lyrics, both of those things speak to the song form. And when you think about the song form, one of the most ubiquitous, let's say, fundamental adages that comes to mind, it's the singer, not the song. So basically what you're trying to do is have the singer survive the process. Now, when I say I made a lot of mistakes in Song Cycle, I buried the singer. I got in trouble for it. I didn't realize I would. But now I know better.
Do you mean yourself?
Yeah, I happen to be the singer.
Right.
But the thing is, it is the singer. And so it's like everything must clarify the singer's intent. And everything must clarify like butter. So many times I do an arrangement, I think about that. For example, once I'm so happy that I got an opportunity to work for Sam Phillips on a song called Wasting My Time. It's now available, I see, on YouTube. But hopefully people will buy her album. She has a child, I think college age is coming. So that she should be supported with physical copies sold. But I used 3 cellos. The same guy, he started with one part and then he put on the other. And to her guitar and voice, well, she took off the guitar. And what remains is a singer with three cellos. Mm-hmm. And I must say, this was an example of brevity and levity, irony, and good thinking about the economy that an arrangement can bring, and in so doing, elevate the singer. Mm-hmm. And so it's not always, when you say how much, it's not always a scramble for more. That's not necessarily.
Somebody might say nothing.
Yeah.
And then you might say, let me see about that. Maybe there's something we could do with nothing.
Yeah.
I mean you're so diverse.
Well, it's true. And the amazing befuddlement on all this is that it's true. The way cannot be told, the way must be found. There is nothing that I have learned that I can really apply to my next challenge. I'm sorry, folks, life ain't fair. And that's exactly the way I look at each job. No kidding. It's always such an abstract process. And you just have to trust the process of inquiry. To me, the whole thing is inquiring. Inquiring minds want to know. And you have to find this revelation and with just put your shoulder to the wheel and move the matter as you explore where it's going to take you. So I always say, I'm not a Presbyterian. I can't predict the future. I don't believe in predestination or the resurrection. I believe it's once with gusto. It's the Big Bang, and we're all here to enjoy it. And in so doing, we must celebrate that process of inquiry. And obviously, although I never intended it, my work raises more questions than provides answers. And that's, I think, only one of the duties of an artist, to leave them in a perpetual state of wonder.
In Conversation was produced by Dublab, a nonprofit radio station broadcasting live from Los Angeles since 1999. Sound editing and theme song by Matea Bain. For more programming, visit dublab.com. And thank you for listening.